someone's in the kitchen with dinos on the old banjo. If I don't feel it low, feel I feel strumming on the old banjo. Been working on the railroad all the long day. Been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Oh, don't hear the whistle blowing right so early in the morning. Oh, don't you hear the captain shouting down the blow? I'm working on the railroad all the long day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Don't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morning. Don't you hear the captain shouting down the blow, yo. Down, I want you blow, down, I want you blow, down, I want you blow, yo. Down, I want you blow, down, I want you blow, down, I want you blow, yo. Someone's in the kitchen with a dino. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah, strumming on the old banjo. Fee, fi, fiddle, fee, fi, fiddle. Fee, fi, fiddle, fee, fi, fiddle. Strumming on the old banjo. What is that? I'm working on the railroad all the long day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Don't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morning. Oh, don't you hear the captain shouting down the blue, yo. Oh, we gotta quit that. See, applieth himself to all, disposes all things. What everyone is given to, even by that Christ calleth them. St. Peter, Andrew, James, John, fishermen, by a draught of fish. These that were studious in the stars, by a star for the purpose. And note that the apparition to the shepherds was no sooner over, but this star appeared presently, if not the very same hour. That is, but at once. In like manner, Christ at first, to show the glory of his greatness, employed fishermen, such as had no bringing up in schools, But it was not long after but learned men came in apace, learned men of all sorts, Zenas in law, 3:13, Luke in physics, 2 Timothy 4:2, Apollos with his eloquence, Acts 18:24, Dionysus with his philosophy, Acts 17:34, St. Paul with his Greek and much learning, and he'd been all the way up there at Damascus, which he had at Tarsus, as famous a university for Asia as Athens was for Greece, which learning for all Festus. Fancy, turn not his brains, Acts 26:24, nor did any hurt at all. There's no star or beam of it. There's no truth at all in human learning or philosophy that towardeth any truth in divinity, but sorteth well with it, seuenth it, and all them to honor him, who saith of himself, ego sum veritas, I am the truth. John 14:6. None that will hinder this, and keep back any wise man, or make him less fit for coming to Christ. See you your calling, all four Gentiles may come. Sinners of the Gentiles may come, yea, they'll be of the primer sort. Men of place, men of gifts, learned and wise may come, in magus, instant oza, high. All are in venerate magi. The star goes before them, guides them all to Christ. It remaineth, what may do we will do. That is, come. For farther than venerant we are not like to come at this time. And though we go no farther, it skills not. So we do but that come. Even that will serve. For it is all in all. We shall go in the company of wise men. That is once. And the shepherds were too homely to soar with. These are company for the best. They were company for Cyrus and Darius and all the great monarchs of Persia. It is in the text, and indeed, not only the persons magi, but their very coming deserved an AC. All right, we got to put this up. Put that up. And put these up. And move the glasses. And find the glasses. This is an evil generation. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with the men of this generation and condemn them. For she came from the utmost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. The men of Nineveh shall rise up in the judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, for they repented, and much more at the preaching of Jonas. And behold, a greater than Jonas is here. I'm going to open this book. There's the train. Oh, put the glasses on. I guess I'd do it slow. Or I could just open a page and do one or the other. So he went to Macedonia, two of them that ministered to him, Timothy and Erastus. But he himself stayed in Asia for a season. And at the same time there arose no small stir about that way, for a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation, and said, Sirs, you know that by this craft we have our wealth. For they shall rejoice, and shall see the plummet in thy hand, with those 7 eyes that run to and fro through the whole earth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is their resemblance through the earth. He's measuring. And behold, they're lifted up by weight of lead. In the midst of the ephah. And then he casts something else in, called wickedness. And he cast away lead in her mouth thereof to equal it out. So the wickedness was more than she was. Then lifted I up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, there came out 2. That's right, because we need another one. And the wind was in their wings, like a stork and lots of stuff, because they be picking up snakes, and that's the law now. For they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, Whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, To build it in a house of the land of the Shinar, and it shall be established, and set there upon her own base. And they that are afar off shall come and build in the temple of the Lord, and ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. And this shall come to pass, if ye will diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. And the voice which I heard from heaven spake to me again, and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went to the angel, and I said unto him, Give me the little book. And he says to me, Take it, eat it. Shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. I had some of that a little bit ago, and I took the little book out of the angel's hand, ate it up, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. See? He thought it was going to be this way. And depending on how you look at it, if you're thinking about your belly better being bitter longer later, then you know you're right. And Hezekiah said to Isaiah, what shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I shall go up into the house of the Lord the third day? And Isaiah said, this sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he hath spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees, or go back 10 degrees? Question. And Hezekiah answered, it is a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees, nay, but let the shadow return backwards 10 degrees. Some say that's like 7 on a time schedule, and Isaiah cried. And he brought the shadow 10 degrees backwards, by which it had gone down in the dial. Some's going to say it went back up. At that time, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And Hezekiah hearkened to him, and showed him the house and his precious things, and his silver and his gold and his spices, and his precious ointment, and all the house and his armor. He found his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto them, what said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, no, they come from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, and what have thou seen in thine house? And they said, Hezekiah, they seen all the things that are mine. There is nothing that I have not showed them. And Isaiah said to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. And he done a lot of things, for he built up the high places. He built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord said, in Jerusalem will I put my name. And he built altars for all the host of heaven, and to the 2 courts of the house of the Lord. And he made his son pass through the fire, so they said. And he set a graven image of a grove, of the grove that he had made in the house, of which the Lord said to David, with these guys first, and these guys last, in the house of which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, behold, I am bringing such evil upon Jerusalem and Judah, and whatsoever heareth of it, both his ears shall tingle, because I will stretch over Jerusalem the line of Samaria, and the plummet of the house, and measure Ahab. And I will wipe Jerusalem as a man wipeth the dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. And I will forsake the remnant of mine inheritance, and deliver them into the hand of their enemies, and they shall become a prey and a spoil to all their enemies. Can a man take fire in his bosom, and his clothes not get burnt? Can one go upon hot coals, and his feet not be burned? So he that goeth to the neighbor's wife, whosoever touches her, shall not be innocent. Men do not despise a thief if he steal to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore sevenfold. He shall give all the substance of his house. Till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to a snare, and knoweth not it is for his life. Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom. I am understanding, I have strength. By me kings reign, and princes decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. On my knees. Words of righteousness. Receive instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. Lazarus, so that room was in the bosom of one that was rich, that is of Abraham, a great man, yea, a great prince in his time, Stella Magnum. But yet, all of this while not touched Stella Majorum, not yet dealt with Magi, the very word of the text, and the chief person they represent. For beside that they were great states, they were also great learned men, and being both, they are styled rather by their name, of their skill and learning, than by that of their greatness, to point us to the quality in them, principally to regard. You shall not need startle when you hear the word Magi, as if they were some sort of Simon Magus was, or later times. It sounds not well, this name. Of old it was a name of great honor, and was the name of Tyrannus and Sophius. But even these names get changed. All the like case. Evil and unworthy men took them after, so they lost their first reputation. What was first will be last. Last was the first. But originally Magnus was the title of high knowledge, and of heathen knowledge is comprehended in this very knowledge, that they were well seen in the course of heaven, in the stars and bodies celestial. Their vividness shows as much. The stars God hath given us for signs, saith the book of Genesis. Even ordinary, as if them the extraordinary, such as this much more, for signs they are, open signature to come. This learning of theirs made them never the more further, and did them no hurt in the coming to Christ, no more than it did Moses. He was well learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, saith Stephen. Nor does more than it Solomon, that he passed all the children of the East in their own learning. 1 Kings 4:30. No more than it did Daniel, that he was brought up well, seen, cunning of the Chaldeans. Daniel 1:4. No more these than the gold and spoils of Egypt did the tabernacle hurt. That was hung all with them, over them. They that are seen in these learnings of Egypt, of Chaldea, of the East, are not thereby barred at all. This is their star, their guide, a guide out and proper for them that knew the stars. For them they were learned. It's a tabernacle. It says it was found. And his wife was a daughter of the priest of Median. And they're calling him barbarian or outsider, tyrant, or something different. Can be language. They got along though. It was found upon the floor. The timber and materials, came they not from Hiram's country, a heathen king? The chief workman in it, the son of a man of Tyre. So the heathen were never wholly out. They came, they made crossers, some little star still. But even of them he sent to the Jews, saith not Isaiah directly, the root of Jesse should be as a standard. All of the nations gather unto him. Saith not God there, it was too poor service of Christ to do to him, to draw to him, sort of silly shepherds. He would give him as a light to lighten the Gentiles, to bring them even the very best of them from the ends of the earth. That light to lighten the Gentiles was this star. Simeon had it revealed to him wherever this star referred and what it meant. The Jews will not quarrel us touching it. There is on all sides between them and us good agreement. For upon the coming of the wise men from the east, there was a synod of the high priests and scribes called at Jerusalem, the very first that was read of in the New Testament, and called by the king, to resolve the point about the place of the birth. Upon so famous an occasion, this resolution grew so notorious, as it dare of all people, the very people could tell this. They argue in the 7th of John against our Savior by it, that he cannot be from there. And the language. And they were surprised when Paul spoke in Acts. They said, you speak Hebrew. And he'd been in Damascus, way up there. For Christ was to come out of Bethlehem. That was taken as granted. And he came out of Galilee, as they thought error. And we have no quarrel between those in agreement. And this is before the King's Majesty at Whitehall, Monday, the 25th of December, on Christmas Day. And it's on the Nativity, thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth, and to me that shall be the ruler in Israel, whose goings forth hath been from the beginning, and from everlasting. And because there were 2 Bethlehems, one in the tribe of Zebulun, another in the tribe of Judah, he saith it was Bethlehem Ephratah, which is the tribe of Judah, as St. Matthew, rather given the sense as standing on the word says. Moses tells us more. It's plain, no oracle of Delphos without any equivocation at all. That pregnancy, that birth, is sure too big for this place. The whipping post saw what flesh and blood would accept straight, as ever they carry a conceit against some places and persons. And it was not the place alone, but all were little then, the time, and solicitous brumali, the deep of winter, when the days are at the shortest at least, and the people he came of little. Amos saith, who shall raise up Jacob, for he is small. Look but to this feast, it is St. Augustine's note, Descender Magi, document scribe, reminds me. The wise men, they learnt the way, and they went. The scribes, they taught the way, but they tarried still behind. Oh, do as did the wise men. Let the scribe sit still, and scan and read lectures all the way. On went the wise men on their way, and performed their worship, the end of the journey. And so let us, this for, do his feast. And this would serve for the way, if it were nothing but the way, if that were all. But if the enemies beset the way and stop our passage, then it will not dukes, a guide, serve our turn. We must have dukes, a captain. Then, the second sense of the word, in Greek too, one on guard us, and to make way for us. For we are not only to be led surely without error, but safely without danger also. Fruitful first that it brought forth him, for he hath brought forth, seen come of himself, said Isaiah, a lasting seed, the fruit whereof to this day shaketh like leaveness, as the green grass covereth all the earth. For indeed, good heed would be taken that we go not to the wrong. Bethlehem, Zebulun by the sea, Bethlehem the barren, Bethlehem the fruitful. No more was it that which the fathers observed of trees that were used to be about it. There's not a post anywhere, not a spare, not a pin, not anything. Not even the wall, it says later. No more was it that the altar of the temple was founded on a threshing floor. First and principal point of inquiry at the day of doom, even about feeding and clothing and other works of mercy. Now if we could bring these two together, these two twins, make a conjunction of them, like Gemini, twin. If I was a historian, it were worth all. Church, that if any came to him for advice and comfort, as some did, though not many, he might impart to them, this custom being agreeable to the Scripture and fathers, expressed and required in this sort in the communion book, not repugning the 39 articles, and no less approved by Calvin in his institutions. Yet was quarrelled with many different people. Upon occasion, some of his talks as a point of popery. So some people claimed him to be too popish. Some people said that he was against what they thought the 39 articles more than some people were for them, or meant understood them different. But he also spoke against Calvin institutions. So the scandal was taken by some, though not given by him, for his reverent speaking of the highest mystery of our faith and heavenly food, a Eucharist. Some call it a supper, which some are so stiff in their knees that they don't want to think about it. It doesn't matter what you do with it. But they said that they were doing it a little bit too much, I guess. So I guess those people would say that he was not for the 39 articles as much as they were. But see, he used to not add to something that can be amended for the sake of not writing something new, because he knew that his adversaries would use 39 articles against him eventually. So, unlike but similar to Hamilton or Jefferson and Jefferson, this guy who's been reading from thought it better. Roger's brother, Richard Roger's brother. Because he spoke reverently of the Lord's Supper. So he must have been popish. But he didn't want Calvin using some freedom something articles to end up messing up, because he was loyal to the king also and wanted to keep the Pope away from the king. So imagine this conundrum right here. And now he was the third path. I guess he was so loyal to the Pope that he wrote this sermon before Queen, for was the most famous of his texts at the time, proclaiming, "Thou leddest thy people like sheep by the hands of Moses and Aaron, O Queen." So, to not have ill regards with the Jews and all, and to not have ill regards with the king and all, and when they heard it, it tinkled in their ears, which sermon through courtiers' ears are commonly so open, as it goes in at one ear and out the other. Yet this left a victuals behind in many of all sorts. and I never saw his majesty more sweetly affected with any sermon than with that. But to conclude, I persuade myself that whensoever it shall please God to give the king means, with consent. And he found out about the plot in another castle and getting hijacked, that certain people were behind the plot. But just because they're called affiliated with Rome doesn't necessarily mean that it is Rome. And if it was Rome trying to do it because of something, he knew there was another party involved. So that makes 4. Or are they one of the other? And why would they be another? And then the next day, they started putting entries in this book relating somewhat out of order. So I can just make any story I want. And he gets into discussion with Casaubon, but enough is told you here, and they're going to write a letter. And they found out that certain people partaken in the gunpowder plot were by certain people who want to call themselves Jesuits. And they were thinking about the French in league with the king. But no conclusions yet. But there's a letter. But the letter doesn't get sent back to the king for another 4 months. And then when they finally get a letter, when he goes back, it's been weeks. So the king doesn't know. So what's wrong? He wasn't left in charge, ultimately, because the Casaubon was assigned to put something together, find out what was going on. It was nearly the end of October. Was not forwarded. The letter was completed at the beginning of July. And certain others. And then even later on at a kidnapping. And then interaction with Bellamy. Back and forth. And then he wrote a letter back still defending the king. While he was steadily, did he know if Calvin and the French were involved in it? And there was several entries. But they're all out of order. These extracts, the later of which are placed out of their chronological order, refer to the letter to Cardinal Perron, which Casaubon was then preparing under the king's direction. From the diary and the letters of Casaubon for this Bishop Andrews, working as archbishops, because all the archbishops know that the underlings do your job. He wrote a tortellatory, questioned by his opponents and addressing to the cardinal the letter, whether or not he was involved, to what degree. With response from Pierre saying Andrew was being a little unfair. There's other references. But certain topics have been talked about a lot. And this is dealing again with the 39 articles. Whether or not that Calvin will use them against him. Getting gunpowder plots and getting Calvin using stuff too. It's hard to stay centered and expect good. I delivered him your proposition, and withal, upon long conference, something you had written touching the Armenians, countenanced himself with some of his letters, whereupon he fell into long speech of a writing that the Archbishop had got from him in some parts of the argument, and that he knows not what become of it, for he never gave a copy of it, but only one to Mr. Hooker, who promised to return it, but never did. And he expressed all the while which opinion he inclined to, but still insisted if they had any writing of his, they should show it, concluding that I should assure you that they have no letter of his, and that vehemency that would give me leave to send you his head in a platter, if they could show any letter of his. Strange to me in a discourse for almost 2 hours, and again, February 14th, 16, 17, 18, I made an errand to Ely House to have shown the bishop the Pope's determination twixt the Franciscans and Jacobins, if he had not seen it, as likewise what you wrote concerning Grotius, to make him at least more, when you hereafter though, for aught I'd ever heard, he hath used caution enough that way, but he was at Lambeth. Last, addressing Wren, he said, Well, doctor, God send you may be a true prophet concerning your master's inclinations in these particulars, which we are glad to hear from you. I am sure I shall be a true prophet. I shall be in my grave, and so shall you, my Lord of Durham. But my Lord of St. David and you, doctor, will live to see the day that your master will be put to it, upon his head and his crown, without he will forsake the support of the church. When in 1624 the Spanish policy of the king finally collapsed, new measures were adopted to check the growing boldness of the Romanists. Andrews was a member of the Royal Commission for banishing Jesuits and seminary priests, and he probably shared in the general irritation and alarm that was felt at the starting aggressions of the Papist faction, and still tried to keep Calvin out. Were enforced, and it would seem that this step, coupled with the proclamation for the banishment of the priests, drove the Romans to desperation. The gunpowder plot was set on foot and was ripe for execution on November 1605. This attempt may be regarded as a culmination effort of the Papists to reconquer England for the papacy by violent means. Since the death of Philip II of Spain, 1598, the war with English independence had entered a new, less dangerous phase. There was an invasion, it is truly said, not of force, but of opinion. The newly founded order of the Jesuits endeavored to gain, and they're both communists, gain their objects by way of war, of books and pamphlets. This method, already dexterously used, by people who post under pseudonyms and hidden names a treatise on the succession to the English crown. The aim was which to show the extreme uncertainty of a succession and to perplex men's minds by multiplying the number. It's all witchcraft. It's hoop-de-doop-de-doop-de-hoop-de hopscotch, the gunpowder plot, while producing a strong anti-Catholic reaction, still trying to keep Calvin out and probably put an end to the policy of violence, rouse an army of Roman Catholic pamphleteers. Go get on the newspaper. You got all the big money. That's what that boy said. I asked him. I went over and I said, what are you doing? He said, they got all the money. I said, but they must them what? The garter and the garnet. The garter guard executed for his share in the plot. The Romanist participants abroad industrial represented garnet as a martyr. Oh, poor you. Poor you, last straw, garnet straw, to the contention of Bellarmine that the oath of allegiance was in itself unlawful. Pledging to a pope, King James himself replied in an apology for the oath of allegiance. Bellarmine's answer was put forth under an assumed name. Even big dogs using fake names. Fakers, you little fakers, what you are. The king replied by a reissue of his former pamphlet. Andrews was considered, next to James Ussher, to be the most learned churchman of his day, and enjoyed a great reputation as an eloquent and passionate preacher. But the stiffness and artificiality of his style rendered his sermons unsuited for modern taste. Nevertheless, there were passages of extraordinary beauty, such and such. Cited, T.S. Eliot. Christmas Day Sermon, Journey of the Magi, 23rd Psalm, Lord is my shepherd, shall not want. And Bolin. Got a picture of that clock. He has an academic cat named after him, known as, don't know what that is, but it's like a mortar board made of floppy disk. But I can already tell that although some said he was too much of the Passover Eucharist, that he says he likes to use the word sacrifice and altar because that's what it is. But as far as the manner, it says, and, well, the procedure by the same rules that the Passover was. That's what he says. By the same way ours be termed a sacrifice. In rigor of speech, neither of them for to speak after the exact manner of divinity. There is but one and only sacrifice. And that is Christ's death. And that sacrifice but once actually performed at his death. At his death. But ever before represented in figure from the beginning. Ever before represented in figure from the beginning, and ever since repeated in memory to the world's end. Memory to the world's end. That only absolute and else relative to it. All else relative to it. Represented in figure. Only one. Ever before represented in figure. Hence is that what names they carried, ours do the like, and the fathers make no scruple at it, no more need we. So, somebody's starting trouble. During Elizabeth's reign, 1588, following a period after other people and other people and other people and other people, Queen Elizabeth, in a sermon, Easter week, 1588, he stoutly vindicated the reformed character of the Church of England against the claims of Roman Catholicism, and introduced John Calvin as a new writer with lavish praise and affection. in 1588 with Elizabeth. Yeah, Andrews was certainly no Calvinist. It had been said that he developed a proto-Arminian. So do I. See, now I'm going to go ahead and tell you. They spend another 4 pages on proto-Arminian, as he's a proto-somebody that is, that Lawless guy, wherever he's at. But they don't spend another 4 pages saying he's proto-Calvin. And he's already spoken about the Arminians in a letter. Somebody said he didn't want to support Calvin. On the ascension of James I, Andrews rose into great favor. He assisted at the coronation of James I and Anne, and in 1604 took part in something. It's like that group, you can hear them talking throughout history. What is civil rights? And I've heard it in the last, month or so. Somebody said, oh, yada, 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 they're trying to repeal everybody's 14th Amendment and taking the, whatever. Like, if you're like a minority, if you're a lady, or heaven forbid a black lady, they probably the worst, or black people, or different types of people, and vote. It gets into voting and stuff, and there can be arguments made with voting and who's voting and stuff. But 14th Amendment, and then there's arguments, and it's what I think may then be like far liberal or something, and they're like, oh, they're crying about it, and then I'll find somebody else that's liberal, and they're like, well, yeah, we need to get rid of it because it was never ratified, and we needed to make amendments onto existing things. And just amend those and not write a whole... Because every time we write something new, it's opportunity for somebody to manipulate it and twist it again. So we just add and only add onto an existing. And that's the first principles. Was first will be last. But people get used to stuff. But Bellamy, this guy, he wrote against it. He wrote a letter to him or whatever. And he was... Roberto Francesco Romolo Bellamino... 1621, an Italian Jesuit and cardinal. So he was kind of smart, probably knew 13 languages. He was canonized as saint in 1930 and named Doctor of the Church, one of the only 27 at that time. He was one of the most important figures in the Counter-Reformation. It's like, and not just him, hey, I ain't giving you all that credit. Even Calvin can use you against the king. And you can use Calvin against the king. And the king can drop a bomb on both of y'all. So, that's funny how that works. So after reading his Eucharist, you can see that he's not pro-Roman. And here's my little sip of coffee. Stained coffee cup. But then he gets kidnapped. The king, James, says in 1582, the discontented lords made a bond one another in the enterprise to displace Catholic influences around the young king. Their party became known as the Lords Enterprisers, and their opponents were the king's favorite. So the king happened to have some pro-leaning Arminianist and some pro-leaning proto-Calvinist and proto-Arminianist, that is. And one group was another group, this not calling themselves Jesuits, but they're working on the outside. calling themselves the Lord's Enterprisers, saying that Lord's Supper was Catholic. Well, maybe it wasn't enough for you. It wasn't definitely not Catholic. Not today. It is originally, though. Who shared control of government. James VI was seized while he was hunting near a castle, a Ruffin, in Perthshire, August. Some sources, including Robert Bow's letter, English diplomat sent to Scotland after the event, state that the king was captured at Ruffin Castle while he was out hunting. Had to be an inside job. Ruffin lords presented the king with a lengthy supplication to explain their motives and their surprise action. They told him they needed to reform him. And then people write about it. But see, even in that book, it says he had leanings. But some other first sermons, the beginning of it, even when people write about somebody, every time you add to an amendment or existing law or 39 articles, so yes, they can be good, but they can also, if they can use them against you, there needs to be clauses in there. And every time you add more writing, it was said he started to cry. The master is reported to have said, "Better barns greet than bearded men. Better cry than bearded men cry." They were making fun of him. Andrew's name is the first on the list of divines appointed to compile the authorized version of the Bible, which was commissioned in 1604 and published in 1611. So if we can pacify one side and then pacify the king, then what's the other groups we got to pacify? So he headed the first Westminster Company, which took charge of the first books of the Old Testament. At this time, I guess we had the Bishop's Bible, Matthew's Bible, I don't know, Geneva Bible, but he wanted a better translation, which took charge of the first books of the Old Testament, Genesis to 2 Kings. He acted furthermore as a sort of general editor for the project as well. So you can't say he was all Catholic, and you can't say he was pro-Calvin. So, and there were times when he might discuss things with the king. On October 31st, 1605, his election as Bishop of Chichester was confirmed. He was consecrated a bishop on the 3rd of November, installed Chichester Cathedral, November, and made Lord High Almoner, 1619. Following the discovery of the gunpowder plot, Andrews was asked to prepare a sermon to be presented to the king in 1606. And he preached a sermon. In his sermon, Andrews justified the need to commemorate the deliverance and define the nature of celebrations. This sermon became the foundation of celebrations, which continued 400 years later. In 1609, he published Trumpets, a learned work which grew out of the gunpowder plot controversy and was written to answer Bellarmine's Matthias Tortoise, which attacked James' first book. He made it clear that he did not support the results. He and the Remonstrants attempted to use the ecological similarities between the Contra-Remonstrants and the Puritans to persuade James I not to involve himself in the Synod of Dort, or to support the Remonstrant cause if he did. So he really wanted to keep the king away from him. You see what he did there? And he said, "King, Don't be a part of it. And if you are a part of it, be your anti-pope. Though the influence of Francis' person, Andrews was appointed other presbyteries and this and that. He became a master and went on to be at Westminster. He died about 26. On 1590 earlier, as a chaplain under Elizabeth, he preached before an outspoken sermon. And in October that year, 1590, gave his introductory lecture at St. Paul's, undertaken to comment on the first 4 chapters of the book of Genesis that were later compiled as orphan lectures. You got to remember, this guy, I got to remember, he was similar to Usher, but was not as usherized. Certainly, when, I'm not going to bash Usher, though. We may disagree on 1 or 2 numbers, but the amount of the rest of those 1,000 pages, some good information. Andrews liked to move among the people, yet found time to join a society of antiquaries. And what's interesting about the society, they discuss and disagree and fight amongst themselves. Elizabeth I had not advanced him further on account of his position to the alienation of ecclesiastical revenues. So this guy opposed the Pope and opposed the King. In 1598, he declined the bishoprics because of stuff attached to him. Chains. And he preached a controversial sermon on lots of stuff. It's a clock presented by Henry VIII to Anne Boleyn. Later. I like these wood things. They later become steel, wrought iron, and all sorts of stuff. Thought that was neat. It says the mechanical application of this scape is equally admirable and simple, and it is to be regretted that we know not to whom we can assign so ingenious an invention. I have already shown that Henry Wig's large clock was provided with such an agent in 1364, but since the printing of that paper, I've examined one still older than Wig's, which weakens the claim that Justin of Cologne's was the first one. Was printed, I observed that a claim is made for the engine in the usages de ordre de citrus. See Calmet's commentary, which was compiled about the year 1120. But assuredly that relates to a sort of alarum. It says sacrosanct is merely ordered to regulate a morning caller, so that it shall ring and make him rise before the matins. Indeed, I found no other mentions. So that one has small balls. The circular side of the box bears the signs of the zodiac, in less archaic taste than those on our own clock. But Virgo sits upon a unicorn. It says he was elected a member of this society in 1604, being then Dean of Westminster, afterwards Bishop of Chichester, Bishop of Ely, and Bishop of Winchester. The most eminent divine of our nation in his time. He was employed in the new translation of the Bible, had just begun. There's a letter in a letter to Mr. Hartwell. Says he died in 1926. Lancelot Andrews. But as far as it goes, it may be esteemed authentic. Short memories of each, as far as concerns their relation to the society, may not be unacceptable to the world. And like the other wood carving, whether it's a clock, to Anne Boleyn, or pedestals, just carving wood. We make wooden sword stands. They became made out of wrought iron, metal, twisting, blacksmithing later. Here's an early wood one. This would have been something Lancelot would have seen all over the place, every altar, more than one. These wooden types. This one's from St. Helens, Bishopsgate. It's one of the oldest varieties. Sword stands, wooden sword stands. Sword stands, wooden sword stands. Say that 3 more times. Wood stands, wooden sword stands. Yeah, say that 3 more times. Wood stands, sword stands, wooden sword stands. At St. Helens. That'd be like Lancelot had. It's interesting, there's monuments like this. It's like an altar-looking thing. It says attic. It's got Greek written on it. This is found way up in Northumberland. And they're saying they can just look at this and they know. See, we've looked at coins, and there is certainly times when they may have even an Athenian looking something on it, or but they'll have Latin writing. Sometimes all Latin, and paying a type of respect to Greek, if it's personages or something on a coin, but it would be written in Latin, and then in other periods of time, it would be Greek, and then one letter in Latin, or one in Greek, and written in Latin, or on one side Latin and on the other side Greek. And so this is more term paper, peer-reviewed, or find it, and this is one that's fortunate enough that was there at the location. It didn't get moved. See, when they get moved, you don't know where they're at. But this one was found authenticated. Didn't get moved somewhere and did not know. So, but it's kind of cool. Monument, which is way up past Thebes, right? Greek. You could call it Macedonian if it's Greek. You could call it Alexander the Great. You could call it, but you'll see in the paper they'll say, well, this is obviously wrong. And when Rome left Britain in the beginning, sometime 100 to 200, 300, 400, maybe even be up to 500, 300, 400, 500. And but they pulled out rather, and it might be 180 to something like that, because it's not really has a bunch of crazy Neptunes and stuff on it. So when Rome finally pulled out, you see, they whooped everybody, but they didn't whoop Britain. So he peer reviews it and said that it adds a lot of commentary, a history of boundary markers on the extremes of the boundary and how it could have been relayed by the Romans, be the furthest into British territory, way on up Northumberland, and this and that, and how it might even be traced back to burying people in older scripture, go on the edge of the land, this and that. But it's obviously of the date of Rome. Obviously sometime writing, which is after 400. It talks about the time of the death of Arcadius, 27 years after that, in 80, 430, the Romans quite left Britain. Be that late in the game, and still Romans writing Greek, not Latin. That's what they say. That's what this guy says, because it don't have Neptune or something on it. But then you got another peer reviews coming up. Says, well, observations on the same inscription. Another doctor, professional in the antiquities, in the society, said, I paid attention to all the inscriptions and this and that, but I'm here to tell you, Greek's not, in general, like all runs the same. And if you look at it like in some standard, it's great embarrassment, because there's plenty of things to show it's like that. And there's no copies or facsimiles of Greek stuff, and they've been doing that for thousands of years. This could be old. And this is just like what's on a Minerva or something of that age, Minerva. Now, just because they want to, this guy, dating it way back, but then to go on and just add, well, it's probably a goddess and this and that, as if a goddess is a thing. Other than just to see that the dates are way pushed back with this peer review. And this was going on it's old stories, what they do. Mr. Andrews, in reply, expressed his appreciation of the privilege of bringing the subject before the society. The paper was in an imperfect condensed form, and he hoped to pursue the inquiry as Mr. Brindley had suggested and examine various groups that had been barely mentioned. Any classification was difficult, but the one adopted was found to accommodate the most of the examples known. He had not intended to cast doubts on the authenticity of the surviving versions of Ptolemy's geography. Professor Callender held that the Mappamundi belonged rather to archaeology than to geography. The circumference and diameter of the globe had been calculated almost exactly by Eratosthenes, and the sphericity of the globe was known in ancient times. Could that have entirely disappeared? And Pliny said that there was misguided persons considered the earth flat, and Pliny was in the hands of the venerable Bede. St. Augustine's view, however, was diametrically opposed. And Pope Zachary, in the 8th century, said that all who gave credence to the idea of a spherical earth should be excommunicated. So Ptolemy is winning the money. On this day, the origin of the compass might be still more remote. Possibly the Romans were acquainted with it. There were static and kinetic elements. So Ptolemy and Portolini. The publication of Ptolemy's maps gave the seafarers a basis on which to build scientific charts, and the acceptance of Ptolemy ruled out all of this Mappamundi. But they did say that it was good for picture of medieval minds to get full appreciation of the age, just as maps were indispensable in modern history. Mr. Hinks expressed his indebtedness to the Andrews because he liked they were shipfarers for much instruction in the subject, and had hereunto regarded as outside his own specialty province, which was limited to maps based on latitude and longitude that had already been programmed. He had determined much pleasure both from the paper and the subsequent discussion. Marco Polo's Moses of Shoring to the so-called Christopher Columbus maps. Mercator's Greenland map, Northern Asia, with Arabic words and more. Results of Persian and Arab chroniclers preserving the Greek ideas. On down, or on up, even with the rabbi putting in their 2 cents. But still later, map occurs in other cardinals' hands. From, if you like pina coladas in China, to the Fortunata Island in the west. For an addition, got an account of fabulous antipodes. It's a big fire. It's a problem with these Gothic structures with the wooden trusses. It was not really a problem if just people burn them down. Made out of wood. And man, it takes wood. For like God gave Jews wrote about Christ, he likewise gave Balaam to the Gentiles, who on the mountains of the east prophesied with a star. Great odds, I know, between the men, none between their prophecies. Both alike true, both their places alike in the library of the Holy Ghost. After that, Jonas, however, his book stand in the volume of the prophets. Yet when time it was showed that in time he was the first of the 16 prophets. First, the prophet of God sent to Nineveh, the great city of the Gentiles, and sent him before he sent any other of the 15 to his own people. But he said unto them, Be not afraid, seek ye Jesus of Nazareth, which had been crucified. He's risen, he's not here. Behold the place where they put him. But go your way and tell the disciples and Peter that he will go before you into Galilee. There shall you see him. He said unto you, just as he said. Said the stone which the builders refused, the same stone is become the head of the corner. Flee the superstition, for the knee is not all. He farther requires somewhat from the tongue, and reason that member of all the other Psalms calls our glory. Peculiar we have more than the beast. If they be taught to bow, bend their joints, we have tongues, besides to do something more than they. And indeed, the knee is but a dumb acknowledgment, doth but simplify, signify, implicit, but a vocal expression, confession, that doth utter our mind plainly, and so is looked for at our hands. The tongue, and thirdly, to speak out, not whisper between the teeth, but clearly and audibly. And it was praise, and they said amen. St. Heauen was like a clap of thunder. Hallelujah is the roaring of the sea. And so praise it is to us, who as our joints stiff to bow, our voices are hoarse to confess. The knee and the tongue, why the knee first? Why begins he there? They be marshalled right, for having by our knee bowed, put ourselves in mind of due regard of him. They in heaven cast down their crown and fall down on one accord and confess him singing. The angels around. And the boasters and others fall backwardly and are made in the end to cry, the city Galilee, though they gnaw their tongues when they have done. The tongue, and every tongue, that is, every speech, dialect, idiom, language in the world, stand charged with this confession. Every spirit to give breath, and every tongue to be as a trumpet to sound. Lord of heaven, he gave the keys of it. Lord of earth, he hath the key of David, and it of his, of every kingdom else. Lord of hell, for lo, the keys of hell and of death to unlock the graves, of hell to lock up the old dragon and his crew to the bottomless pit. A great Lord, for whither shall one go to get out of his dominion? Mark them, fell either. By that shall ye best find the fata temple. The destinies of both temples were alike. They began alike. The first news of the temple was heard at Ephratah, which is Bethlehem. So was it of him, for there he was born, like in the beginnings, and in their ends no less, appeal to the text and content. Those him himself, both were destroyed, both were reared again, and in all things his body and his temple might be suitable. That temple was destroyed by the Chaldees, down with it even to the ground. After the church burned down, they moved a little altar up behind the high altar inside. And, but they said right at his eulogy that someone said that whoever was talking was saying that he was making him to be out a lot more papish, and they were talking about it immediately during his. So I guess say something before you die, that way they don't mix your eulogy up. Then you can get on back to what you're doing. While space does not permit us to describe the jinks, which used to be held at the club every month, the following circular or invitation will give an idea of its nature. This particular one was issued by Judge Bulk some 20 years ago. My Bohemian children, for heaven's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the deaths of kings. So cried King Richard, not so, your sire. Not so, your sire. In these days the ground is wet. Kings die in their beds. Mostly observe it. There are sad stories to be told of them, but they are not fit for your proper ears. Come rather, and sit upon well-bottomed chairs, and let us talk about fine arts. To you shall be assigned the fine art of listening. The sire hopes you will like your part, but do not make the mistake of thinking it an easy one. You are expected to listen discreetly, not with distending oracle agape for whales, nor yet with pointed ear like a fawn pricking at woods, or they have gained an entrance. Do not listen too coldly, nor be too chary of your smiles. Profundity may ripple without losing depth. Take heed lest you discharge our words before you have quite unloaded them. Precious freights are small and may pass unobserved. Let there be no smuggling. Be careful of your nose, that it be not turned up except for its own fault, and of your lips, that it do not curl unless about a glass. Lineaments have required lineaments ere this, for less cause. And remember all. Do not expect too much. Remember that you are the silent gold, listening to the speaking silver, and be generous to the inferior metal. You know, those Hordish people over there, they didn't rewrite it. Flamenco, they'd be knocking time. It's good to know what they're doing. From hundreds of years off. Oh, flamenco. And they like to create a non-existent reality between the Greeks and the Romans. And just move it all together. But there's a difference. And this gal, see, they get on that. It's like, even if you don't agree on everything, then and out of one side of your mouth, oh, things so bad. But then they're like this. I ask them sometimes. I even ask them. I said, what about the death penalty? Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know that. And then they want to lead you to this place. You shall judge and rebuke, and they'll have you beat your swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, and they won't be no bad anymore. It's just gonna be all right. When out of the other side of the mouth, they know as bad as you could be. And you talking about this right here? These people crazy. Because, first of all, the beast that had a stroke of a sword and yet lived, that means we need more swords right off the bat. It is the same language spoken by Homer when Penelope says to Ulysses, tell me thy lineage, and whence thou, for thou dost not spring from the ancient tree, nor from the rock. And besides, if a lamb comes forth speaking like a dragon, all that means is it's being interpreted as a dragon, but it's still a lamb. But just because everybody thinks it's a dragon, it's still a lamb. In other zodiacs, the sign of the scales is marked by a measuring rod, which shows that of a millimeter was a measure of the inundation. So let's sing to the immortals. Sing to the immortals. In regard to particular festivals, let's sing to the immortals. It says it is to Egypt we must turn to the origin of festivals. They got different calendars. Egyptian calendar still preserves, it says, the most ancient matter, which has been Christianized by Copts, brought and readjusted according to the Christian dates. For example, the 26th of September 1878, the 30th Ramadan 1295, or the 17th of Thoth 1594 is the festival of the cross. But we know that we dressed up in Greece like our Halloween and went around asking for things, and everybody had a festival. And that's really where, before any of this witchcraft, Halloween, and even before Reformation Day. But Reformation Day is just funny that it was like the Halloween it's come to be. And everybody calls it something else. And there are those that'll say that, you know, I agree, come Cadmus and this, and it was Phoenician, but it all roots back to Egypt. Well, a case can be made that, you know, almost considered contemporary, that the language was in Minoan first, and the hieroglyphics were made from the Minoan. But to denote an ancient descent from Apollo, says the Egyptians, back to Minoan Greek, a bundle of papyrus depict a bundle and they by intimate the primeval food, for no one can find the beginning of food or generation. This is the papyrus roll or book. The root of the papyrus was eaten. Eat the book. Eat the roll. Eat the root. And tell the story on the papyrus roll. Like a lotus, the form of a typical tree. It's carried in the hands, they're saying, a mother goddess. But she was the librarian Shishak in Egypt. And she was Artemis in Greek. They gave it to me a roll and I ate it. Eat the root and tell the story. Nurtured by the blood and afterwards at her breast. Thus the book and food were both found in the papyrus plant, as they were in a tree. Such an origin as this will explain how eating the book in Revelation could be spoken as a synonymous with receiving knowledge. The worm. Knowledge, inform, and to inform that the earth, which was represented by the mouth and the tree, according to Paul, Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, was Mount Sinai in Arabia. Therefore Ishmael was likewise the son of the mount as typical birthplace. It is also certain that Paul knew this symbolic nature of the mount when he said it answered to Jerusalem, the mother of us all. Well, I guess I'm going to have to make another one of these because I got to open this up. And the other one took 3 days to upload. And I had to put something up there thinking that it was good. I didn't want to delete it. It wouldn't let me delete it. I have no memory. And I didn't know. And it took 3 days. It was an awful long time, 5 hours. And so this one's an hour and 45 minutes. And I hadn't even got to this yet. We got to open that up and mark it up. Give me some coffee. Oh, and Memorial Day. Let's do a news story. Yeah. So this is a girl, like from Egypt. And this is Shishak doing the spot of scribing, writing. She was known as a Shishak. Hey, I know that. Where's it at? Always have something. This one. See, I remember. See it in the very back or the very beginning. Waddell. Not to be confused with the other Waddell that does the Goths and the other stuff like this. This is different. But vnto silliness and one patches gives us the information that he lived later than Berosus. Elsewhere, he puts vnto at almost contemporary with Berosus, or a little later. Berosus, who was priest at Marduk, at Babylon, lived under and wrote Antiochus I, whose reign lasted 285 to 261 BC. And Berosus dedicated some Greek to this king after he became sole monarch, 281. It says the works of Manetho and Berosus may be interpreted as an expression of the rivalry of the two interpretation and expression of Ptolemy and Antiochus. Under the name Manetho, Suda seems to distinguish two writers, different periods, or different opinions. Similarly, though, this other Manetho writes an entirely different topic on astrological things. But it's like similar to the Bishop Andrews. See, if he was all spiritual, writing church sermons, and then found out that he had entries into the Antiquity Society on unrelated topics of spiritual things, that you might think there's two different ones. But the same Manetho can be. It says as he played in the introduction of the cult of Serapis as a Heliopian priest, Manetho, and a quote from somebody says, was without a doubt acquainted with the sacred tree in the hall of Heliopolis, the tree on which the goddess Shishat, the lady of the letters, the mistress of the library, wrote down with her own hand the names and deeds of the rulers and the history. And he did, Manetho that is, nothing more than just communicate that information to other Greek authorities, the Greek world, what the goddess had noted down. So the mystery lady letters, talking Egypt perspective, would be Shishak. She was, from her perspective, she was also called the mistress of the house of books, and looked after the library, and was involved in the stretching of the cord ceremonies that laid the foundation of the temples. She had a measuring rod too. Shishak considered scribe of the gods and recorded the pharaoh's names on the tree of life. And Manetho just wrote this back down, put it into Greek, tried. And then Artemis, in the Greek perspective, she was a virgin moon, a goddess of the hunt. She was chaste and fiercely independent and merciless towards any man who offended her. Artemis usually depicted with her trademark bow and arrow, probably flying pigs too, often accompanied with deer and hunting dogs. She reveals the Virgo's love. Oh, that reminds me. I looked at a Latin inscription. I might write that down later. I was working on it. Artemis. Earlier goddesses under her name, mistress of animals, and maybe even Minerva, because she's got a sword, that's war. It might be found up there in Northumbria. It could be a statue of her. It could be a something to Artemis. That Greek monument with all that Greek writing. Attic. It says Attic something, or Greek. You know, Attic. Attic is like attic. Attic comes from attic, the way the Greek buildings were built. So in other news, It says Germany is planning a ban on the controversial sale of the personal effects belonging to Nazi victims of the Holocaust. Germany wants to stop people making profit from such shocking sales. The first move for a ban will be heard in a regional parliament on this Friday, May 8th, Minister Nathaniel Nizipsky said, where remembrance becomes a commodity, dignity is at risk. It says the government of North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany's biggest state, has tabled a draft law to outlaw the commercial sale of items linked to Holocaust victims. These include, for example, letters or diaries or written material or clothing taken from, or probably guns, you got old Mausers or something, or taken from Nazi concentration camps and death camps. Disturbing items, things related to any camps and files, any type of anti-propaganda, and even yellow stars of David badge worn by prisoners at camps. Letters like that, where they get to send the letter back out and stuff. It says this was horrific. Postcard. Cite around 280 people were imprisoned, 56,000 died through forced labor, starvation, medical experience, execution. They planned self, sparked fury across Germany and beyond. Critics accusing organizers cashing in on genocide, human suffering. Bricks. Sell a book. Go and go. Set under intense pressure. These postcards have released Ukrainian front liberated prisoners around with other people. Let a few of them Soviet Reds out. It's under intense pressure, the auction was halted at the last minute with around 460 more items seized and secured. They were later handed over to the Auschwitz Foundation. Supporters say the timing was critical, and at last Holocaust survivors pass away, physical evidence becomes more and more vital. Warned that the global market, this type of error objects, risks distorting history and stripping these items of their human meaning. Photos, indoor clubs. He said, we owe it to the future to ensure these names are preserved and uncovered. Are preserved and uncovered. Justice Minister said, warned the current system fails to protect victims' dignity and allows a growing international market to thrive. The proposed new law would shut that down. Anyone who buys and sells documents or clothing, personal belongings, and books, and postcards, and writings, belongings to victims like this committing criminal offense. Penalties are tough. Offenders face 3 years prison and fine. Reading a book, with even attempted sales punishable. Any such deals would be automatically void. There said, I'm the caveman, I'm the walrus. But tell me though, this, if you find some shards of pottery like that right there, and all you got to go on is a little, it's got one hump up here, top. You got a little double hump. This is like a little quadruple little hump ridge. And some little handles. And it's all broken into pieces. Little loops. But the clay's the same. As far as the top clay, what it's made out of, clay's the same. There's no outside markings, engravings, letters, numbers. There's no painting or evidence of a period of something said or something like that. But just to look on the look of that, can you tell what century is that from? And you think somebody can? That's rudimentary, shaping clay, pots. Nothing more than a 4-finger around the edge, 3 fingers around the edge, versus 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers. Rudimentary handle, nothing ornamental. How do you think you can date that? It says the cave had become the focus of a pilgrimage. It's confirmed by early church people, lived 185, 254, who reports that there is shown at Bethlehem a cave where Jesus was born. The cave apparently attracted regular visitors, including Origen himself sometime between 231 and 246. It's difficult to imagine that the Bethlehemites invented a cave tradition, particularly because there is reason to suspect the cave was not always accessible to Christians in the days of Justin and Origen. According to the church father Jerome, 340 and 420, who lived in Bethlehem from 386 until his death, the cave had been converted to a shrine dedicated to Adonis. From Hadrian's time, 135, until the reign of Constantine, for about 180 years. Bethlehem, not ours, and the earth's most sacred spot, overshadowed by a grove of Thammuz, which is Adonis, and in the cave where the infant Messiah once cried, the paramour of Venus was bewalled. It says local Christians were probably not permitted to worship regularly in what had become a pagan shrine. The fact that the Bethlehemites did not simply select another site as the birth cave suggests that they did not feel free to invent. They were bound to a specific cave to preserve the local memory for almost 200 years. It implies a very strong motivation that has nothing to do with the gospel. While digging in Bethlehem now, in 1874, the Temple Society underwent a schism. Envoys of Evangelical State Church of Prussia's 1874, Prussia. Man, you got the Bolsheviks done going. You got the Civil War over here. You got the Ottoman done went on. There's a lot of stuff going on. And this was Prussia's older provinces successfully proselytized among the schismatics. Thus, with the Halfe German colony down there in Palestine, became home for, there was other Christian denominations in the 1874s. And we just jumped back a few hundred years, that the discussion of Christians living there was going on with Bishop Andrews in 1600. There was Christians there, while many German were regarded as sectarians. The evangelical proselytes gained major financial and ideological support from German Lutheran. So, but they were Christian, but they were considered secular. More secular than the other one, then, I guess. They created an atmosphere of mistrust and envy among the German Christians living in Palestine, 1850s. Around the same time, you got everything else going on, the Ottomans and you got a Civil War, you got everything else, and you got it going over there in the Middle East, too. It says the German colonists set up camps all around, and population increase. Thus, the evangelical Protestant followers of certain people left. After the temple settled in another colony there. So another colony, German Christians anyway, living in Palestine, a settlement was inaugurated on occasion of a harvest festival on the 6th of October, 1907. And the Christian communities, they planned a new 16 other sites around the central site reserved for the church. Unlike some of the other ones, built more Gothic style, designed in 1915 by architects. German motifs integrated oriental arches, balconies, entrance. Included Bible verses on the gables. It says for many years, modern European manufacturing technologies and farming techniques to Palestine. But this was at the same time period, though, when the British weren't getting along with the Germans as well. Or eagerly followed by new settlers was coming in, British settlers. So they were having their family disputes over there. It says the Christian villages are nestled between several hundred acres of nature reserve. Favored oaks, impressive, majestic, solid trees line both sides the approach of the road. Times of yore, such natural forests would have been the norm. Western Galilee. And the Christians, also the Germans and others, they won winning public appeal, won elections. It says the Templar functionaries appealed to Paul von Hindenburg and appealed to the Foreign Office not to use any swastikas or anything like that to cause any problems, because they were friendlies for German institutions there in Palestine, and voiced opposition to the boycott of German Jewish shops. Later, this opposition subsided. They were getting ran over. More of one group than another. Says they were, Bethlehem of Galilee was turned into an internment camp, surrounded by fences and guard towers. Most of the German Templars were ousted. So they appealed to the higher-ups and the Foreign Office not to use the German symbols, and they wanted to continue their Jewish German shops. And now it's 1994. It's turned it all in there to big trees in a nature preserve. It's home to Valona oak trees, Palestine oak, Aura flora, and forests include Pistachia palestina and other Latin trees and Judas trees. The town of Bethlehem is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as being in the northern territory, a tribe of Zebulun, which included the lower Galilee, Joshua 19:15. Some archaeologists, antiquities concludes that Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Galilee, not Bethlehem of Judah. It says in 1947, the last of the German Christians were allowed to immigrate to Australia. By May 14, 1948, when Israel declared independence, only 50 Templars remained in the country. And then in 1952, as part of a repatriations agreement with Germany, Israel paid $13 million to the German Christians in compensation for their property. They got all those stone works. So some archaeologists with the authority wrote in a magazine, Menorah, the vast database of the Israeli Antiquities Authority describes Bethlehem as an ancient site with Iron Age material and the 4th century Church of the Nativity as associated Byzantine and medieval buildings. But there's complete absence of information for the antiquities of a Herodian period, that is, from the time around Jesus' birth. According to National Geographic, written here, many archaeologists and theological scholars believe Jesus was actually born in either Nazareth or Bethlehem of Galilee, a town just outside Nazareth, citing biblical references and archaeological evidence to support their conclusion. Throughout the Bible, Jesus is referred to as Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus of Bethlehem. In fact, in John 7:41-43, there's a passage questioning Jesus' legitimacy because he's from Galilee and not Judea, as the Hebrew scriptures say the Messiah must be. This archaeologist says there's no archaeological evidence that ties Bethlehem in Judea. So they accept the archaeologist's assertion that there's no direct evidence for the existence of Bethlehem in the time of period. I think there is a little doubt from the historical evidence that it did exist and that the archaeological evidence will one day be discovered. The second claim states that Bethlehem, Galilee did exist at the time of Jesus, and a fortress outside of town in a grove of olive trees strongly suggests it was built to protect the site of Jesus' birth. According to the abstract in his articles right here, that's what happened. Yeah, and you go to the other one, and this is what it says. Can't be reached. Can't be reached. You got 404. According to the article, it says that when he was doing archaeological work around the Bethlehem of Galilee, some of the people who lived around the site told me Jesus was really born there, not south, at Bethlehem, Judah. However, he says he cannot access the fortress site. According to two little towns of Bethlehem and a nativity riddle, Dominic Waghorn explains. In that link, that's the other one. The problem for the archaeological guy is the key piece of evidence has been destroyed. In the 60s, the Israelis built a road through the ruins of the early Christian church in the heart of his Bethlehem. The cave underneath the church was only partially damaged, but he cannot get permission to fund to excavate it. It says, while Bethlehem in Judea was known as the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament as being the birthplace of King David and the birthplace of the future Messiah. It says, much lesser known Nazareth in Galilee, Bethlehem. Not even warranting a mention in the Hebrew Bible or the Talmud or the writings of Josephus and all Sadducees, Pharisees, King's Priest. And King explains Nazareth derives its importance entirely from its relationship to the life and teaching of Jesus. The contrast between Bethlehem, the birthplace of King David, and Nazareth, a small agricultural village, is obvious. Yet both sites were significant in the life of Jesus. So if Jesus was born in Bethlehem, as the Gospels of Matthew and Luke attest, why was he called a Nazarene? Any idea what happened to the religious tolerance site? It has gone off-site recently, and apparently it's not clear. It's another 404. Another 404. Archaeology say up there in Bethlehem, Galilee, says it was inhabited by Jews. I know it was Jews because we found here remnants of an industry of stone vessels, and it was used only by Jews and only in the period of Jesus, Oshry says. He found artifacts which showed that a few centuries later the community had become Christians and had built a large ornate church. He says there's significant evidence that the early Christianity, this Bethlehem, was celebrated as the birthplace of Christ. The Emperor Justinian boasted of building a fortified wall around the village to protect it. The ruins of this wall still circle parts of Galilee village today. He thinks many scholars will conclude that Bethlehem was the birthplace. It just makes more sense if Mary rode on a donkey while she was at the end of her pregnancy from Nazareth to Bethlehem of Galilee, which is only about 7 kilometers, rather than from Bethlehem, which is 150 kilometers. He adds there is evidence of other Bethlehem in the West Bank, or what Israelis call Judea, was not even inhabited in the first century. It says there's inconsistencies in the gospel, suggesting that the Holy Family lived in Bethlehem and only later moved to escape from King Herod's massacre after Jesus' birth. There's a contrast. And Luke says Mary and Joseph traveled from Nazareth to Bethlehem to be counted in the Roman census. Professor pointed out, and there is discussions on the census, noting there's no evidence that a census was conducted throughout the entire empire at this point. And furthermore, you could have went to Capernaum, because, or went up there, that's where they could count at while they were already up there, while ancient people didn't have to travel to a local center to be counted. They didn't have to find an ancestral home, whatever that meant in reality. This is Professor Helen Bond, a leading expert in Christian history at the University of Edinburgh, also expressed skepticism about the traditional narrative. It's almost likely that he simply was born around Nazareth, where the family lived, she said. It's reported by Newsblatt. She explained that Jesus is always known as Jesus of Nazareth, and that Nazareth is the most stable feature in the biblical narrative of his life. And then on the other side, says, this site is not disputed as the authentic site, and to think of what happened here is beyond our ability to comprehend. The Church of the Nativity, located in Bethlehem, 6 miles south of Jerusalem. So one side says something, one side says something else. It says many early Christian texts refer to Jesus being born in a manger in a cave. There were signs of the ancient 2-story guest house, perhaps the place where there was no room in the inn. Parts of a fortifying wall can also be seen, supporting historic records, which refer to one being built around the biblical Bethlehem. That is, it's in Galilee. There's evidence of it. And I can assure you, you type this word in right here, 2 Jerusalems, and you will get a bunch of stuff pulled up right here. But it won't be none but one. They just go on and on. And it'll tell you about their version. There's never could be that. If there wasn't for maps, you wouldn't know. Maybe there was 2 Bethlehems. Maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't if there wasn't for a map. I wouldn't even think to look at it. It's way on up there. You got the dead down here, and the way sea up here is Galilee. Then on up, there's another little water spot. Bethlehem. By the sea. Over here, Zebulon. That's northern Galilee. Northern. Because that's the Galilee down here. It's on up here. A little. Oh, so where was it? Oh, let's open this up. Oh, man. Oh, man. It's gonna be hard to do. Oh, see if I can do it. Oh, there we go. Oh. Oh. How do we do this? Oh. All right. Oh. Yeah, that's already 2 hours. But it ain't gonna be 5 hours. I'm gonna cut it off. Well, I should wait because I'm gonna mark it up. But it'll be the first mark. I don't know. Oh. There you go. Oh. There's an eagle fly. There's a straw man. That's what the wise man said. Built up the straw man. The eagle. Got it off though. Oh. And, alright, I'll only open it. Open it to one. Oh, let's flip it. Oh, see how it's written. Oh, alright. I should look at something though. Because if it don't have Shira in it, I'll know it's a Vatican version. And I really don't know. I want to flip to the middle and see if it's got Apocrypha in it. But, let's see. Let's go here. Let's do this first. We gotta go. We'll start a new one. Oh, but it says the form that of earth, which was represented by the mount and the tree. According to Paul, Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, was Mount Sinai in Arabia. Therefore, Ishmael was likewise the son of the mount That's typical birthplace. It says, it is also certain that Paul knew the symbolic nature of the mount when he said it answereth to Jerusalem. It says, Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, was Mount Sinai in Arabia, and held that it answereth to Jerusalem, the mother of us all. Oh, I know where that's at, but that's not right. See, this is this thing saying something, but it don't say that, because that's not what the word says. Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, was Mount Sinai. Yes, it says that. And answereth to Jerusalem, it does say that. But it doesn't say the mother of us all is Jerusalem. That one don't say that. Because I know where that's at, and that'd be the first verse we look up. That's in Galatians. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, letter, Rome, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, and Ephesians. 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians. And that's in Galatians. We'll see how it's written. And that's Galatians 4:26. Galatians 4. Let's see what it says. Go down. 23. There it is. 24. It says, for this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which is now, and is in bondage. That's what it said. See? Said the earth, which was represented by the mount and the tree, according to Paul, Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, was Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem. That's what it said. And answereth to Jerusalem. But see, this says, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. Oh, but maybe it says answers to us all. No, it says, for this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answers to Jerusalem, which is now, and is in bondage with her children. So I don't know about bondage being, doesn't equate to mother of us all. Because he says, which things are an allegory, but Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. Jerusalem, which is now, is in bondage with her children. The one is Sinai in Arabia, answers to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, the one up there, is free, which is the mother of us all. It's the Jerusalem that's above. That's the mother of us all. It's not. I got to do another one. I got to mark this up.